Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with the story in which our OP, a top-performing structural engineer, was repeatedly promised a new senior role he'd earned, only to be stonewalled by management. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. My old firm thought I was replaceable. I'm a civil engineer specializing in structural engineering, and after graduating near the top of my class, I landed a job in a firm focused on existing structures, bridges, dams, buildings, showing signs of wear. We were the team called in to inspect and calculate risks when cracks or structural concerns came up. When I joined, our team had 6 engineers. Within a year, I integrated well, grew rapidly in both competence and responsibility, and by year 2, I went from the guy asking questions to the guy answering them. My evaluations were stellar, and I got regular raises and bonuses. By year 3, I was handling the most complex projects and mentoring others. I proposed transitioning into a technical referent role, still involved in production, but also managing technical compliance and deeper project questions. It's a position that exists in many firms, and I made a solid case for it, backed by our team growing from 6 to 12, a 30% increase in sales over 3 years, and my ongoing contributions. Management supported the idea verbally and in writing, promising to look into the training I requested to round out my qualifications. But by year 4, while I was practically running the technical show, nothing had changed. I trained newcomers, handled client questions, even wrote technical reports my own manager admitted he couldn't understand. Still, no training, no new position, and I even had to fight to get an upgraded computer for modeling software. I scheduled a meeting with HR to discuss my career path, but they had no clue who I was, didn't prepare, and the meeting went nowhere. In my yearly evaluation, I voiced concern. Again, I was promised a change and given a raise, but no real progress. By year 5, several teammates had left, 2 for personal reasons, 1 because they couldn't keep up technically, and I still hadn't moved forward. I pushed for another conversation with management. They scheduled a meeting with my manager, his manager, and a third manager from another division. First thing the senior-most guy says, "I haven't read your file. Can you explain everything again?" So I explained it all, again. Their response? That I wasn't making enough of an effort, that it was normal for me to carry technical burdens, and that I was asking too much. My own manager sat silently the whole time. I told them I'd start looking elsewhere, and they told me maybe I should. Then a few days later, they backpedaled, saying they would look into meeting my demands, but by then the damage was done. For 4 months, I was treated like a liability, told the grass isn't greener, and warned that I might not find anything better. But my teammates were on my side. They'd learned from me, supported me, and were equally frustrated by management's refusal to act. So I started applying elsewhere. I sent 5 applications, interviewed at 3 companies, and got 2 offers. I accepted one with a 10% raise, a company car, fewer hours, better perks, and a national-level role with less stress. Before leaving, I told management, even if the grass isn't greener, you don't retain talent by threatening them, and others will follow if you don't recognize it. And follow they did. Within 6 months, 2 teammates resigned, both citing how I'd been treated. 3 more later told me they were job hunting for the same reason. These weren't slackers. They were talented people I'd trained and worked closely with. I even tried to hire a couple of them at my new job, but personal circumstances kept them from relocating. Still, I pass them job leads when I hear of something suitable. From what they've told me, morale at the old place tanked. The team became a skeleton crew with no one to answer tough technical questions, no more team banter, no healthy debates, just silence. The most experienced person now has 10 months on the job. Most have less than 5. They lost several of the major contracts I once carried. Some clients even called me personally asking what happened and expressing distrust toward my former manager, who had already burned bridges with them. Sales dropped hard. Last time I visited, I heard they'd fallen to where they were 5 years ago before I joined, losing 35% in just 9 months. Even my old manager admitted they no longer take on complex calculation projects because no one there has the skill to do them. Now their future is uncertain. They don't know how to rebuild the team or attract the kind of work we used to do. All of this because management couldn't be bothered to back up their promises with action. It's been a while since this all happened, but I still think about it sometimes. Mostly, I'm just glad to be out. I've got a better job, more respect, and a healthier work-life balance. But the lesson sticks with me, and I share it often. Know your worth. Don't wait forever for promises. And if a company shows you they don't value you, believe them and move on. It always amazes me that firms don't understand what happens when you can't retain the best employees. And our second story. They said I was ridiculous for not wanting to split the bill. I started working with a new team, and they had the practice of going out for lunch every Friday. I was new to the job, and I know my pay was way lower than everyone else, and months later I realized I was paid unfairly low, and I quit at the worst possible time as a revenge for a better-paying job. I had loans to pay off and was also at the beginning of my career, hence was pretty calculative of my spending. Coming to the main story here, I was invited to join the Friday lunches, and I liked it as well. But one thing that bugged me the most was the bill was split equally. The reason it was a problem for me was I was the only vegetarian in the group. Everyone else used to eat only non-vegetarian food and would order multiple appetizers, main course, etc., and share amongst themselves. I, on the other hand, would just order for me one appetizer and one main dish. They would take pieces from my appetizer and portions from my main dish as well to taste it, and many days I would leave the restaurant still feeling a little bit hungry. Also, I was paying more than what I had even ordered. Usually I used to order food totaling about $15, and with tip it'd be less than $18. This was more than a decade back. But when we split the overall bill, I usually ended up paying $23 to $25, and worst of all, I wasn't even getting to eat what I ordered. So one day, I subtly brought up the idea of separate bills, or at least let me pay for what I order. Most of them ignored what I had said, and the two who responded shot down my idea immediately, saying I was ridiculous. So that day, I ordered 2 appetizers instead of 1. The next week, I ordered 2 appetizers and 2 main dishes, and at the end of the lunch, I packed up the remaining veg food and took home for my dinner. The week after, I tossed in a dessert in the mix and asked the server to pack one of the veg main dishes straight in a to-go box. This is when their alarm bells started ringing. I've been ordering food worth $40+ now, including tips, and since it was getting mixed with the bigger pool, everyone's share had gone up to upper 20s. On the 4th week, when I was about to order, one of the guys who called my idea ridiculous suggested separate bills for veg and non-veg food. That day, I ordered 2 appetizers and 1 main dish. I think that sent a message. I invited everyone to taste the appetizer and offered my main dish as well. I left the lunch feeling full and not having any to-go boxes. In the weeks following, slowly the split concept was gone and everyone started just paying for what they ordered. They'd split the cost only for appetizers they shared. Everyone ended up paying less than what they usually paid, as everyone was ordering more than needed, as they assumed since the bills split equally, they were getting to pay less. But this fails when everyone was doing the same. At least it was a work lunch, so no one ordered alcohol. It's worse at dinner when one couple orders bottles of wine or fancy cocktails and the other couple doesn't drink. There was a post where the non-drinking couple finally told the server before they sat down to have separate checks. The other couple was shocked they had to pay for their drinks and couldn't split the bill 50-50. And our next story. Karen screamed at parking enforcement. I didn't say a word, just smiled. I've had the same neighbor since I moved in years ago, and things started going south the moment their dog began treating my yard like a public bathroom. I asked them nicely to stop, but they didn't care until I started tossing the poop back over the fence. That worked. But ever since, I've become public enemy number 1 for literally anything that goes wrong in their lives. Let's just call her Karen and her husband Ken. Karen especially hates that I keep one of my cars parked on the street in front of my own house. I started doing that after they turned my front yard into their personal auto shop. Picture this. Random dudes wrenching on engines 10 feet from my front door, like I live at a Jiffy Lube. No thanks. Since then, I've become the scapegoat. Someone shoots their trucks with a pellet gun, obviously me. Someone slashes a tire, must be me again. Meanwhile, they're running a full illegal mechanic business out of their garage, welding frames and revving engines at all hours of the night. Then yesterday, sweet karma rolled up in the form of a parking enforcement vehicle. I was sure they were there for my car, even though it's legal, registered, and parked exactly where it should be. But nope, the officer walks straight past me and starts writing up their house. Apparently, someone finally reported their 3 massive RVs clogging up the street like a used camper lot. Karen comes flying out of her house like she's being robbed, yelling, "You can't do this! It's my house! I can park wherever I want here!" The officer just keeps writing. Then she points at my car and screams, "What about that one? I've called about it for months." I couldn't help myself. I said, "You've got bigger problems than me, Karen. I didn't call anyone, but looks like someone else is just as tired of your crap." She yelled something unintelligible. Ken jumped into his smoke-belching diesel truck, and they tore off down the street like a couple of teenagers caught at a house party. It was beautiful. Finally, someone else gave them a taste of their own noise, pollution, and chaos. I didn't even have to lift a finger. And our last story. The boss's wife from the HOA destroyed everything. I worked at a large company that specialized in repairing and maintaining complex office equipment. I started as a technician, but eventually rose to a key position in national support. My main responsibility was managing custom software written by an in-house developer who had long since passed away. This software was the backbone of our operations. Without it, no service calls could be dispatched, and there was no documentation for it. I was the only one who knew how it worked. The company provided housing to its employees, homes in a gated community managed by an HOA. The president of this HOA was Karen, the wife of the company's owner. She was a true tyrant, issuing fines for non-compliant curtains, demanding lawns be trimmed to code every Monday, and constantly calling meetings to review community standards. My house was leased by the company in my name, with rent automatically deducted from my paycheck. The same went for other high-level employees and their families who lived in this little empire run by Karen. At first, I put up with it. I worked nonstop, rarely took days off, so I didn't pay much attention to Karen's petty rules. But when one of my coworkers was fired because his kid left a scooter on the driveway, I began to worry. Karen lived nearby but acted like she owned the entire community. Once, she even ordered my lilac bushes cut down because they clashed with the aesthetic. The real pressure began when I refused to implement a new policy that would hurt our service quality. A new director, one of Karen's husband's friends with no experience, took over and promptly demoted me. I was reassigned to a dispatcher position, which legally didn't allow me to use the core software, so I did exactly as told, sat at my desk, did nothing. The system froze, no one could assign service calls, and the company began hemorrhaging clients. Even within the HOA, chaos erupted. Air conditioners broke, gates failed, and coffee machines in the communal building stopped working. Karen began calling every day, demanding repairs. Her husband convened an emergency meeting. I was summoned and begged to return to my former role. I refused. I reminded them of the accusations against me and their lack of appreciation. They panicked and sued me, but the court ruled in my favor, stating they couldn't force me to perform duties outside my job description. The company unraveled. Managers were fired. I found a better job with more pay and freedom. I moved out. My new employer paid well enough that I no longer needed the company-provided housing or Karen's HOA. Before I left Karen a little gift. Through a friend, I hired a landscaping crew to trim every non-compliant plant in her garden. Lilacs, roses, even her favorite linden tree. They did it entirely by the HOA rules she wrote herself. Her scream echoed through the streets, and for the first time, she felt what it was like to be powerless. I drove off into my new life, and she stayed behind, surrounded by empty houses and unresolved service calls. Karen in this story is a true master at making life difficult not only for everyone around her, but for herself as well. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.